Program is sponsored by Sue Minahan.
Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Get ready to find your free will from your roots in the stars.
Hi, I'm Sue Rose Minahan, host of Talk Cosmos, and tonight is February 27, 2021, and our subject tonight is passing the talking stick. It's a metaphor. It symbolizes the axis of the Gemini Lunar North Node and the Sagittarius Lunar South Node. Ancient cultures they cut notches into a stick, and it was a record reminding them of their sacred stories communicated by elders. And tonight's astrological chart is ruled by Mercury, the communicator, and Virgo Full Moon. So those particular rulers are conjunct, and we'll find out more about that. There's so much to be involved. We have two Seattle astrologers tonight joining us. Karen Wennerlind, for over 28 years. Karen has combined her knowledge of business, astrology, tarot, mythology, metaphysics, and mediumship, and she creates a distinct client-centered approach. Karen has an online study group, teaches classes and workshops in Western and Uranian astrology, and is based in Seattle and via telephone and Zoom. And she serves on boards of the Washington State, on the Washington State Astrology Association as treasurer, VP, and president, a board on Kepler College, online, it's a wonderful school, Camp Edgewood, and the Church of Divine Grace, both National Spiritualist Association of Churches, and currently treasurer in the Council of Vedic Astrology. And she's a member also of the East-West Astrologers that was just on January 20th. Marcia Butchart is an NCGR level 3 qualified astrologer. It's quite a competent level to obtain. Many people have 1 and 2, but 3 really asks for the final details. And Marcia is really an expert, we know, in many facets. Marcia has studied astrology since her first Saturn return, and the majority of astrology books at that time were psychologically oriented on astrology. She kept reading and researching to find those teachers and follow her diverse interests. And in 94, which now is quite a while back, it's incredible for us astrologers to realize, Project Hindsight with Chris Brennan and Rob Hand, really legendary. Well, Rob Hand is legendary, and Chris Brennan is also a very astute astrologer that we have esteem for, captured her attention. And today, Hellenistic and medieval astrology continue to be her scholarly focus. Marcia's expertise knowledge makes her an excellent resource for fixed stars, horary, and Uranian astrology. And I have to keep emphasizing Uranian. It's fascinating, and really with all the people that have been on the show, not very many give this qualification such as Karen and Marcia do. Her current endeavors focus on Hellenistic astrology. Marcia is a member and former board member also of the Washington State Astrological Association, better known as WASA for Washingtonians, which I have been, and now though I'm in Hawaii. Marcia enjoys consulting with clients, tutoring student astrologers, and lecturing. So tonight, I am so glad to have both these panelists join me. As you can see, that is Karen up at the top and Marcia at the bottom. And interestingly, today, this talking stick, as we were chatting, came evident because of the dynamic full moon. Virgo full moon is what we call squaring the nodal axis. So it's it's a very potent moment. Now, if this direction that we might have, perhaps both of you have a thought that you want to share concerning this energy at the moment that we have. Marcia or Karen? Hi.
Sure, I'll talk. When the nodes are at that 90-degree aspect, or when a planet is at a 90-degree aspect to the nodes, it's a point of reflection, maybe a point of crisis sometimes, not always, but sometimes. But it's a place just a little bit magical, where there's more emphasis, there's more clarity about what it is one is trying to accomplish in life. So it's the bigger pieces, the conflict between the past and the future. How do we bring those together so that we can go ahead in the present in the direction that's taking us, that fills our heart?
This immediately resonates because of the fact that the sun is in Pisces, empathetic, and Virgo, the moon energy, wants to somehow distill that chaos, confusion. So as a direction, it's really, and I think, okay, there's so many factors here. We've talked prior to this, and there's many ideas. One of them is remembering immediately that Mercury is ruling this chart. It's the ruler of Virgo, and it's in Aquarius. And I think, Marcia, you brought up this wonderful ideas from Gary Caton of Aquarius is an air sign, and it's the witness. I don't know if that, yes, triggers ideas.
It does. What Gary Caton, who is a magnificent scholar in his own right, in his own way, and has done plenty of research on Mercury cycles. And one of the things that he sussed out was Mercury's elemental year. What element of which sign are each of his retrograde, where we revisit, rethink, redo, reconsider, remember, all of those words.
Yes.
Yeah.
In what element are we remembering? What factors of life in general are we reconsidering throughout a given year? His given year starts at the winter solstice. Okay, at
Yes.
roughly around the 21st of December. So after 21st December 2020, in what sign bunch is Mercury going retrograde and direct? Sometimes it's all within one element. Sometimes it crosses elements. Mercury will go retrograde in a sign and then turn direct in the sign behind it.
Yes.
This year we have a very clean year. All of Mercury's retrograde periods take place in the signs of air. Aquarius first, Gemini in May, and then Libra in October. So Gary equates this with Carolyn Pearson's notions of the hero archetype, where he equates the element of air with her archetype of the witness or wanderer, and says that this is about revisiting and rethinking and reframing our notions of what is our social contract with our fellow human beings.
It's so super. I just love this clarity, because the moon always is our stories. I hope I'm not interrupting here, because I remember you distinctly,
Oh no.
yes, reminding me, because in earlier times, the moon is memory and past, which I've always loved realizing, because the light is a reflection. So just energetically that way, it's the past. It's past light, so from that aspect. And when we are the witness, we were talking about like the direction, of this bendings at the moment, the square to the nodal accent, not accent, but axis, all of this begins to create this idea of what stories we're bringing, being the witness to it. You know, the past, it's very, rather than being ingrained and enmeshed, you know, so clearly.
Can you do something different? Now is the time. Because if the lunar nodal axis, okay, is this sort of, the star by which we're steering, really. So this full moon is taking place across that. If you think, as the ancient Greeks apparently did, according to the scholarship of Robert Schmidt and Demetra George and Chris Brennan, who followed him, the Greeks were a seafaring nation. And so Schmidt believed that a lot of their astrological metaphors borrowed from a maritime set of examples. So they talked about, for instance, the ruler of your rising sign as the helmsman, the one who's steering you through your life. In considering the nautical metaphor as regards this full moon, thinking of if the lunar nodal axis in Gemini and Sagittarius is the mast of the ship, this full moon are all the bows and the spars and the sprits that are at 90-degree angles to it. And it's those spars, those particular structures that allow you to trim your sails to figure out how to get where you want to go.
Perfect with a Pisces sun. Karen, it's like we are at sea as much as we think. Karen, I can see you bubbling. What's happening?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's always so much. And because as we're moving forward, it's like there's this feeling that says, I want to propel forward. I don't want to stay stuck in that past. And the past, we remember it, but we haven't lived it since it's already gone. It's not present, only this remembering of it. And so it's like, oh, well, what do we need to bring forward? It's like, what is that process of bringing forward? And it's like the best of what we've learned from the past. Absolutely, we bring forward. And it's a moment at the bendings of opportunities for consciousness and for the growth of that consciousness with understanding and context of our own life.
Yeah, this idea of the past, because in context of Virgo and Pisces, because it's opposite, it's Pisces moon. And I'm thinking that with past, there's a lot of chaos, there's unconsciousness, there's that fears that have been stuck down, not wanting to be seen. Because if we can reimagine the future, some of these words that begin to have more context here, and go through, like you were mentioning in our own chat, going through these shadows, it is a process of refocusing in a new perspective, what stories, how it has the light of the moment to work, because Jupiter and Mercury are really talking together. They're sitting right next, they are. They're sitting right next to each other. And because Mercury is right between Saturn and Jupiter, from their conjunction. Yes. So there is some form here. There is a way to create a new path, a new pathway.
Yeah, the Virgo energy The positive of the Virgo energy says, I want impeccability. I want this new thing I want to bring in to be absolutely impeccable. But that surmises that one knows what that means, And the negative of Virgo is the intense judgment, because nothing can be perfect. We can't live up to perfection, so are we wrong? And this dynamic back and forth with the Virgo energy, it's like, but just do the work. It's like, do the work as clearly and as with as much, again, consciousness as you can, rather than perfection.
There's also the factor about Virgo. Virgo is not necessarily, even though it aspires to perfection, it takes into account every single detail. And this means that the Virgo orientation uses all 5 senses. If you're thinking of a sailing ship through the fog, the Pisces fog, okay, Virgo says, okay, if you can't use your eyes, you'd better figure out something else, or you are going to run aground. There is a magnificent song in an old Steve Miller album from the stoner era, and it's called, appropriately enough, Songs of Our Ancestors. And the entire song, which is like hugely long for that era of 3-minute pop songs, starts with the sound of foghorns. Now, we live in a maritime area here, as do you, Sue. But unlike you, we get loads and loads and loads of fog.
It's so true.
And to hear those huge boats signaling each other so that they can make those Virgo minute course corrections and not slam into each other is really something to contemplate.
And very important. I'm so glad to have this conversation with you both. And I'm remembering too, though, Mercury at its maximum elongation right now has that additional clarity to share those details and to make that discernment. So it is really a powerful time, that each month seems like, it's powerful, but thankfully we are realizing that as we climb along in life, whether it's the mountain or down in the sea, it's very potent that way, that we can get some clarity through the fog, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and another quality of Mercury with Jupiter and Saturn, and even in the sign of Aquarius, is learning how to respect the opinions of others in the group, in the society, in our relations, in our family. Learning how to respect those without having to kind of disown the people who don't agree with you. It's like, I have my opinion. It's my opinion. It's what I do. Okay, it's mine. And you have yours. Awesome. Good for you. Glad you have that opinion. Not mine, but it's fine. It's having that. To me, it's in Aquarius, we have a tendency to splinter into my opinion's right and your opinion's wrong, the righteousness of it. But the challenge is to open up to the universality of diversity, of that there's many opinions all along a huge spectrum, and we need them all. It's not either or, it's yes and.
So good.
And.
Because that really is, there's several questions that were coming up, like how does one empower ourself, and talk to ourselves to tell our story? And I think what you're saying is that by deconditioning in this new way of our whole life that we've experiencing as we go forward, is sifting out our own identities, what the conditioning from past, because if we're going to create new forms, our talking stick of new stories to hinge our sails to and do our paths, it's really, yes, that's important to realize, that we can have that witnessing. Again, it comes back to that, doesn't it? It's really a returning energy that Gary, because it's all in those mental signs right now. We just finished the retrograde. That's why it is so elongated, for clarity.
And I want to give utmost respect to the people who are trying to do the North Node work of taking in all those different viewpoints. Because if you think of the nodal axis as the mast of a ship, in the old sailing ships, say, in the 19th, 18th, 17th, 16th centuries, the lookout would be sent up to the top of the mast to be in the crow's nest, as they called it. Do you have any idea what the sensations must have been with this thing going back and forth, and you're trying to see the horizon? Is there any enemies coming? What is is there land nearby? You'd look for cloud formations that would indicate that, okay, there's an island nearby. But can you imagine having to do that under those conditions that would make any one of us seasick if we had to do it ourselves?
Yeah. That's
Can you imagine climbing that mast?
Oh, on occasion, with a few movies, it has crossed my mind, but I have forgotten. So I agree. And that's where they want the baluster. Is that what keeps the boat balanced?
Yes, want the ballast, the stuff in the bottom.
Which
you
is
want your South Node.
Yeah, and that's an excellent metaphor too. So what is our balance? And so thinking back about the ancestors and this talking stick of ancient times and going forward, it's, oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a great experience with a modern talking stick in a sweat lodge where it was simply passed from one person to the next, and then you spoke what you were called to, what your feeling state wanted expressed, and it wasn't something you thought about. It was just that stream of consciousness talk. And while you said that, all the rest of the folk who were in the sweat lodge just witnessed you. And it was such a beautiful feeling to be heard on such a deep level. A lot of what I think is happening in conversation is not witnessing. It is simply, oh, hurry up and shut up so that I can talk and tell you what's really right. It's not that respectful witness. That to me, if we take the talking stick with us figuratively in our conversations with others and just allow the other person, even if it's just in our head, we go, oh, here, talking stick is yours, and then pay attention.
Wow.
Yeah.
That settles into my bones. I love that. Because it is true to really listen. And that goes back to the senses. I think, was it Marcia saying about we need all our senses. And really, if we go back to a Mercury in Aquarius, it's part of the fixed signs, as we know, and it's the fixed grand cross, which again uses Taurus with all the senses to activate in that dynamic, that square. Not the same as the one we're talking about, folks, if with people listening that aren't astrologers, because we're talking about a mutable cross right now with the sun, moon in Virgo and the nodes in, but Gemini and Sag, but rather the ruler. This is where complexities come in. but the ruler Mercury is in Aquarius. So then looking at the same dynamics with Taurus that is ruled, but anyway, because listening is so important, like you were saying, to witness, to hear and let it be. Let each one of us. Go ahead, Marcia. You're thinking about, yes.
Yes. The difference that you talked about Virgo and perfection, Karen, and the sense of wanting perfection. And the challenge between the sign Virgo, where the full moon is today, and Aquarius, where Mercury, its ruler, is that in my way that I always looked at the difference between the two signs, Virgo knows what perfection should look like. And Aquarius is seeking an ideal perfection where it does not know what perfection looks like.
Very good. Well, we will be back. We're going to take just a little cutaway here, and I am with Marcia, and you're going to have to help me with, I always call you Marcia, but it's Butchart, right?
Yes.
And Karen Wennerlind. And tonight is the Talking Stick with Talk Cosmos for Pisces, and February 27th. See you soon.
While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the yin period of Pisces, ruled modernly by Neptune and by Jupiter in traditional astrology of the ancients. By leaving a cycle based on the equality of all humans and brilliancy, Pisces concludes the 12 signs that energetically encompass the entirety of the universe, where humans have no control. As a mutable water sign represented by two fish swimming in opposite directions of the forces of life, we experience in Pisces the collective unconscious energy of the unknown. Intuitive, psychic Pisces completes the seed cycle, initiated with Aries' willful separation from the Piscean womb.
Talk the show.
Hi, this is Liz Machette, astrologer, tarotist, Reiki master teacher, and you're listening to Talk Cosmos on Alternative Talk 1150 AM, where we discuss the meaningfulness of our roots in the stars.
Make it a great day. Keep your dial on Alternative Talk 1150.
Hi, Sue Rose Minahan again, and thank you everybody for remembering that this is our audios for Saturdays. Next week it'll be Sundays live. Glad to see you there. And yes, I'm with Karen and Marcia, and we've been talking about communication, really. How are we communicating? Because we have an opportunity to let the old story go, and reimagine this future. And I think Marcia was just picking up on this idea of the perfection, as we were in a context of Virgo, and we were thinking about using other senses if one way of trying to understand our perfection. But still, regardless, it is a matter of trying to tell ourselves, what stories are we telling ourselves? What is true?
Well, one of the interesting stories that has a Virgonian cast to it is actually documented very nicely in my colleague John Wadsworth's book, Your Zodiac Soul.
Ooh,
he takes you on a journey throughout the year that you do as a yearly thing, but you don't start on January 1st. You start on this journey when the sun enters Aries. So the fact that we have a Virgo full moon, but Mercury, the ruler of Virgo, is in Aquarius, brings to mind an interesting story that he recounts of Penelope, the wife of Odysseus, a seafarer. Are we seeing the theme here? Yes. So meanwhile at home, as John writes, on Ithaca, with Odysseus assumed dead, Penelope keeps her many suitors at bay with cunning. To appease her admirers, she promises that she will take a new husband, but only when she has finished weaving the burial shroud for Odysseus' father Laertes. So she weaves by day to the satisfaction of the suitors, and then unpicks her work by night, so that the shroud is never finished. And in this way, she manages to remain faithful until Odysseus finally arrives home.
Redoing and redoing. I've heard that and I forgot. I love that. Yes.
Yes. I mean, I'm going to disappear here for just a second. Yes. Because I am among other things, an astrologer, but also a fiber artisan. Okay. I do crochet. Very Virgo. I have a Virgo ascendant, so this is normal. I cannot tell you how many projects I've had to destroy because they just weren't working out. My friend has a t-shirt that says, "As ye knit, so shall ye rip."
That is a perfect comment on how we've concluded that what is success? It's not how many times we fall down, but whether we actually get back up again. Yes, exactly. It's like that mass going back and forth. It was almost like you going down and coming back up. That was perfect, Marcia. Yeah. Yes. It's really a matter of weaving and that bringing in the details and refinement, because we can't do it all. Gemini, as we know, wants to collect. And for what purpose? Maybe to help shift the Sagittarius perspective on our belief systems. So that's the ideal. Mm-hmm. Of course, there's some, yes.
Yeah, because the Sagittarius ideal, as it were, it's Sagittarius and Gemini. They're both mutable signs, and they're supposed to be flexible. They're supposed to be it's easy. There's a flow to them. There's nothing stopping them from their expression when they're natural, when they're in their natural state. When you get stuck, there's no flow. It's like if your life, if your life is getting stuck and you're feeling like you can't go forward, this is an extremely supportive period of time in allowing you some freedom to let go. It's like, okay, what else is possible? What else is possible? What else can I do? How can I shift? How can I see things in a different way? It's because this is meant to be the natural energy of the time is an energy of flow.
It's and clarity, like I was saying, Mercury is at a distance. It can be seen. And for those non-astrologers, Mercury is so close to the sun, it's really in the beams, as they call, under the beams, because it's in the sun's light. You just can't see it. It has to be, I think it's 15 degrees and at the most 28 degrees. Yeah. So it's in that period, the furthest, what they call maximum elongation. Mine is not. So it's always I think both of yours are at maximum elongation. So it's always a subtle, but important for communication, clarity in communication, because we have many aspects. In Pisces, it's poetical, it's mystical, it is more metaphoric, how to describe things. It's not linear A to B, but yet still we need to, like the story that you mentioned, Marcia, this sense of weaving and what great, what would be the way, what was the motive or the choice, to be able to, that really gets me onto other subjects, but there's right.
There's always more, isn't there?
And that's
More
that.
and more.
And isn't that what we're doing and trying to communicate? The Gemini thinks of all these other ideas, and Virgo's like, no, 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 no. Let's just like undo that story, rip that little business apart, kind of like the knitting or whatever,
Yeah.
and recreate, because eventually we are working with that Pisces, and the new moon is coming, and energetically this whole time to reimagine, to refocus, to rebuild.
Yeah, and sometimes you need to let go of absolutely everything so you can empty out and have enough space within you to listen, to choose the next thing. So often we're so caught up with, oh, bright shiny thing, bright shiny thing. Ooh, let's put this one here, another bright shiny thing. Come on, that we just get overwhelmed with all of this. It's like it's all good, and you can only do so much. You can only master so much. And what is that capacity for you as a person? Sometimes just allowing ourselves to become just a little broader, instead of headed down this real narrow path, just broaden it out just a little, just to see, there might be a little something out on the sides there. And then once you can do that a little bit, maybe you can do that a little bit more. Because again, there's not a right way to do it. We have to learn it. We have to just feel it. And,
I think that reminds me again of the story of some brilliant folks that you used to know many years back in the Mensa group, that really, they may not have been so practical, but this group of young people that were young at the time. Mensa is this extraordinary, intelligent certificate. I don't know if it's a certification, but it's a membership of like the highest 2%. You have to have an IQ that's quite elevated. I have a nephew that is involved with that too. Our cousin, rather, not cousin, pardon me. But the point being that their success was just related to what you're saying. It was, they tried many things, that playful, whether it's playful or not, it's exploring. It's just, okay, it didn't work, but it's finally, something would work, like the light bulb. It could work in theory, and then the practicality. And it reminds me, thinking of ancestors, thinking of our metaphor here with the ancients, and so many of the seafaring, and that we're bringing in, because it is the moon and it is the reflection. And we're coming not just from last year's calendar, but from really ancient histories sometimes. And that is this, think Sue here, I divert myself. Oh gosh, darn. Oh, I had it all.
Yeah.
Well, the thing that too I re-listened to this afternoon was a lovely workshop given by Bernadette Brady from the UK. That was given, 8 years or something ago, like that, at a NORWAC on the lunar nodes. And she, in this talk, viewed them as gateways into our protected, sense of self. They brought in the energies of chaos. The North Node was the chaos we seek out in order to grow. In this metaphor she was drawing, like the sailor who climbs up into the crow's nest and risks, barfing all over the deck many feet below, to, see where the ship is going and report back. The South Node is chaos that is visited upon us. From a lot of times our past, our bodies, as she said, illness can change your life in a split second. And you didn't really have anything to say about it. An accident, things that your family does that all of a sudden turn everything upside down. The ballast in the base of the ship, is that chaos, the currents of the ocean. You can't do a damn thing about them. When you are in the ocean, and by now You know what I know, Sue. When you were swimming in the ocean, you do what the ocean wants.
Oh,
Yeah.
great
You're not doing
reverence.
laps in a pool. You
No,
had
it's
better be conscious of the currents and work with them, or you're not going to live very long.
no,
Mhm.
yes, great reverence for that which we do not control.
That
Yes,
which we do not control.
yeah, and really, all of this reminds me in our where we're at in life, as just as a reminder, which if it needs it, is that we are in this time of COVID, where all of us on some level are departed from what had been familiar and established, and in this whole system of new recreation on political levels, economic, social levels.
Mhm.
It's enormous. So
Yeah, and all of the chaos is creating the opposite form of it, of trying to control. It's like, well, what can I control? So let's control that. When that doesn't solve the problem out here of the chaos. But it's like it's like finding a solution to the thing that's not the problem.
and it's
Yeah.
important, going back to our whole theme here, is like, what are we talking of? Well, we're talking of this talking stick that we realize is a great metaphor. And it's because communication, we're in this North Node of with Gemini, is how do we communicate? This is a process that, again, is going to be following us for the next year. We're just, or at least a good half year. I'm not sure when it changes to the next cycle, but I think it's been about a year. Yes, since May 4th, I realized. So maybe we have another 9 months ahead of us. We're about halfway. And so trying to work with chaos and beautifully remembering this idea that it's like Bernadette, the great doctor of Scotland and of astrology and fixed stars, a wonderful teacher, reminds us that this is a natural process. Right now, it's exemplified with the sun in Pisces that we're filtering it through, but something important to, and at the bendings, I'm threading all this into how important. And go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, and Carolyn Mace talks about it like we're being cracked open. And I like that analogy as well. It's like you're being cracked open so that there's places where you're solid, that South Node coming up and cracking you open and leaving you vulnerable and leaving you with questions instead of certainty.
That was Plato. Plato always spoke with questions. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I love that from Carolyn. The last month she's talked about that quite a bit, and with that there's a lot of fear, and it's like, recognize that's healthy. Hello, I don't know where I am. I'm scared.
Oh,
Thank you, body, for telling me that I don't know where I am, and I'm owning I don't know where I am, and I am owning that I don't know where I'm going next. Take a breath. All right. Shall we ask someone what might be the way down this road? Shall we, it's like, what steps do we need to take now? But to acknowledge that our fear is there to show us something, to tell us something, to bring more awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And really, how natural this is, thinking too that we're leaving 200 years of earth consciousness to air consciousness, because Capricorn, which Pluto is still in, and we've had this time with Saturn being in its own sign of Capricorn, and of course with Aquarius is still ruled by by Saturn, co-ruler, but definitely by Saturn. In other words, I know Laura Nalbandian also often teaches that Capricorn is fear versus mastery. So for a Capricorn to feel uncertain is quite fearful, because it's a matter of having steps to obtain the goals to rise to the top. And we're, as a collective consciousness in the globally experiencing this huge transition, that we're going ahead as just to remind, it's Jupiter and Saturn, their 20-year conjunction, that this time is a grand mutation from one element to the next. So yes, it's a good point. It's uncomfortable to not know where we're at, but yet again, it can be that welcoming chaos that if we trust, boy, doesn't that bring in other elements, to trust that by working out still steps, there will be sight when we get up on top of that balancing, not balancing beam, but the mast,
Yes, the crow's nest.
Yeah. Well,
I'll see something.
Yeah. And we've got a path ahead that you have to walk through and realize, chaos isn't such a bad place. It's a super creative space. When we get over our fear and we say, what's next here? We'll discover, this idea, that idea, this thing, that thing, because now we're broken open to possibility. And that possibility is only there because we're broken. And we've got that South Node. That was a great analogy from that you brought up, Marcia. I mean, that was for the South Node. I love that. Bernadette is fabulous. Yeah. But that whole, it's like, how do we grow within ourselves? I mean, this period of time from a business perspective, because I'm a business person and I look at charts and I look at business charts often, this is a great period for businesses, for starting things. And great change. So how do we change that all up? And the small businesses that I especially love have the most flexibility potential to be able to weather the storm and to transition through. The bigger you are, the harder it is, because you're trying to toe the line and being a structure. It's like, smaller businesses will do better, I think.
So what month was it last year that Zoom really took off as a company?
Oh, that's a good question, because everybody went to Zoom. It must have been, and pardon me, was it back in May or June, I think?
No, it was
April? Earlier?
It was early in March. As soon as people started shutting down, the market realized, we're all talking on Zoom. I wonder if that's something I can buy.
I started my membership.
Yeah. And so, from a stock perspective, that the business just exploded.
That would have been around the equinox. And so going back to this measurement time of calendars, when to start, I know that Talk Cosmos started in April, just past the equinox, but it happened naturally. And different calendars do start, whether ancient ones at the solstice, winter solstice, and then there's others at the autumnal equinox. But for Zoom, why were you asking that, Marcia? That's a good question.
I wanted to see if there was any correlation in time with the explosion of Zoom into the market, stratospheric, with the regression of the Gemini North Node getting out of Cancer and into a sign that has to do with information transfer.
Well, I did realize, pardon me, you just totally, at that time in March, Saturn went into Aquarius, and the 21st of March, I believe, and then it conjunct
No, Saturn was
Mars.
still in Capricorn all last year.
Yeah. No. Saturn.
Oh, you mean he tiptoed like,
Yes, yes, he went
0
into,
degrees and then went
yes,
back.
he went into Aquarius on the 21st of, because I remember doing a show and I was just looking too to find out what the nodal rulers were, because in our earlier conversation, we were going to look at when it ingressed in the nodal signs, and it was May 4th. But on May 4th, so anyway, so I happened to notice this, but Saturn was in Aquarius for about 2 months, and then it went retrograde again back to Capricorn for most of the year. And also Mars was in Aquarius. They made a conjunction on the 31st of March. So I'm thinking, because this goes along with the idea of the stability of Saturn breaking the eggs and making a new creation of form, which it did through the Zoom. Yes. And I'm noticing the time. I'll just say that next week we're having Planet Buzz panel. And tonight we have Marcia Butchart and Karen Wennerlind. And we're talking about the talking stick. Find us on Talk Cosmos. You can get a hold of both of them if you're interested for their wonderful consultations and other activities. And also, this is the last Saturday show. After this, it'll be Sundays. So we have several minutes here to continue if I didn't interrupt myself. Yes.
Yeah. So Zoom was made public back in April of 2019. It had been privately held prior to that. So it's new to the stock market, but it's been a wonderful tool for at least 5-6 years that it's been available. But boy, did it just explode this 2020
in 2020
with the shutting down of everything.
Mm-hmm. And it proved itself to be such a superior online platform for not only intimate conversations without huge amounts of other professional, company strings attached to it. And it is blessedly free of quite a lot of the limitations of some of the other online conferencing platforms.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes back to us. I think something, Karen, you said in our little pre-chat about limitations, like looking at this entire Virgo energy, to kind of segue back into that whole idea, because it is really liberating, isn't it? Here we are. This Zoom business allowed me to, instead of getting to the studio where we could all powwow together. I hope that's a okay thing to say, powwow, but because I love that. But we are conversing with YouTube. It's very exciting, through the chaos into new clarity. Yes, we're trying to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's where there is a will, there is a way. And that technology moves itself and moves itself and moves itself. But underlying it all is the structure is built. So getting a vaccine is possible, but it was based on a foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And for instance, because that vaccine, and we have about a half a minute here, a little bit, was back. Now we're not in an eclipse time, but thinking of the bendings at the middle of the nodal axis, and also with the lunar eclipse in November 30th, and the next one coming up in May 26th of Gemini, taking that, like the vaccine, where we didn't know what was happening back in November, but now we have Johnson & Johnson, a one-shot deal maybe, and who knows in May how the new belief structure and new foundation will be.
I'll finish off by saying just one thing. Virgo Full Moon, chop wood, carry water.
We're sailing. Thank you, Marcia Butchart, and thank you, Karen Wennerlind. It's been marvelous. Sundays from now on, we'll see you again.
you for listening to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Be sure to tune in next Saturday at 6 p.m. to continue finding your roots in the stars.
The views expressed on this program are those of